All right, here we go. Hey, this is Benjamin over at Heterodox Vigor. I was really planning on taking it easy this week and not doing a video. However, there was a comment section where multiple people with varying levels of in many cases, basically they brought forward, hey, but the establishment narrative is this. And I'm like, right, but that's so transparent. You can see how the things that they're saying are true-ish, but that they're not saying the things that actually matter in context. So, and it's the reason why I'm actually making the video to begin with is because it struck me they're doing exactly what I do in my profession to an extent, which is that on think about the old saying about how the best lies are 90% true. It gets worse when you're dealing with humans and trying to get them to behave a certain way. Because what you can actually do is you can, for instance, there's a function with my job where I'm expected to say a true thing, ask them to do something, and set expectations for what happens after they do the thing they're supposed to do, after they comply, right? So in a big way, I literally, that's what I do at my work, is that I am a compliance guy. I am, and the way that I generically get people to comply is I tell them something true that they're not going to argue with. I ask them to do something as though it logically follows, which sometimes more than others, and then set their expectations, which again I'm going to do based on, to the best of my ability, on what is the most likely to happen based on what I know. Like, and of course I frame it that way. Hey, right now the best information is this. If something happens, it happens, right? Okay, so on that basis, what I'm saying is that a lot of these establishment narratives are very much in the form of, hey, like, example, like, hey, if if the prices go up too much, then that's bad because inflation. Therefore, we're going to raise rates to lower inflation. Why would raising rates lower inflation? And this is where they start getting less honest. I'm happy to tell you the reason why raising the rates would, uh you know I mean, here's the thing. If the cost basis for borrowing money is higher, then we would expect, all things equal, which they never are, people are going to do less of that. It's more expensive. Unless their desire to do it has changed, we should expect the price point at which people opt out is you know going to be low enough that you're going to get a decrease in the behavior. And that's the thing. Those elements of decrease and increase in behavior compared to the price point of the thing that you're interacting with, that is the core of what people should care about when they care about inflation, in the sense that, again, any given move is really only going to affect the prices of the actual items that were involved, plus any other items that would have been involved, except that people changed their behavior. So, like, for instance, let's say that we don't want people smoking, and we do want them using solar power. So, on average, we should expect that if we subsidize solar panels, and that if we tax smoking tobacco, then we should have more solar panels uh, purchased and assumedly produced, and we should theoretically have fewer tobacco smoking products consumed. Uh, and that's the interesting part, right? Is that that makes sense, right? Well, let's choose a little bit different examples. How about um, we're going to tax working, and we're going to subsidize taking a low income job that so basically if you're working but you don't make a certain amount of money, then we have programs to kind of to fill up that gap a little in various ways. So we are subsidizing low wage employment in the economy. We are allowing people who otherwise would not have been able to pay their bills because of government programs and policies. They would have had to either reject the job offer, or they would have had to at the very least like get more than one job, right? But but now they don't actually have to, because they can accept the low income subsidies, government programs of various sorts for them and their family. In fact, there's definitely it used to be the old wisdom that you needed to get your finances in order to have kids. And we're now seeing in retrospect it was a nasty dysgenic trap, because what it is that the responsible people on average delayed childbearing until they could afford it on their own, while on average a bunch of other people that were more familiar and comfortable with government subsidies, um, and people that maybe just like, hey, like me, did I plan on? No. Do I use some government programs? Yes. Did I plan on them? No. Are are they there? Are they for me? Yes. Have I been working and paying taxes for decades and feel not at all bad about this because I'm taking care of me instead of someone else? Yeah, no. I don't feel bad about that at all. And as long as I continue to do some sort of work in the economy, I just won't. Because at the end of the day, and of course, anyone that knows me knows that like this video, I'm not getting paid to make this video. I think I'm doing this video as a public service, but more to the point, I'm doing it of the selfish basis that I would like people to understand what's going on, so that we can maybe push back a little bit when they do things that aren't in our interest, right? Crazy talk, I know, right? No. So we need to say, hey, let's lots of deficit spending, and a lot of it was for corrupt reasons. Great to complain about the past. It's not solving itself. We need to care about the future, right? But to understand the future, we do have to understand the past. And if we want to know what's likely in the future, we're going to want to know what the patterns were in the past. So here's the big one that I want everybody to remember from square one. The corrupt people in the system have a basic game plan. It is grow the economy with monetary inflation of various sorts, and then cut liquidity to crash the market, buy up an ever increasing share of the market at fire sale prices every time they crash it, rinse and repeat. And what you're going to find is, of course, stuff like, there's a gap between hourly wages and monetary notional productivity, like the value of that was being produced by those workers. It's definitely one of those things where I don't want to jump to quick conclusions because I'm like, no, this is really sus. There's a lot of moving parts, and we should want to understand what's being said before we get too serious about accepting or rejecting it, right? So, what are these guys trying to say at the Federal Reserve? What do they think their job is? What is it that they're saying? And again, props to Tony for throwing in the establishment view. It's not Tony's view, but Tony was reminding us of what the establishment narrative is. Well, what's the establishment narrative, and what's wrong with it? Right? Let's start here. We have dollars. Dollars are legal tender for the United States of America. This is important because that means if you want a contract enforced in the United States of America, in our legal system, you're going to need to denominate, especially whatever the default penalty is, whatever that looks like. It's going to need to be in dollars if you want US government to enforce it. And as long as that's the case, then what people don't understand about where does the value of the dollar come from? The value of the dollar comes from the fact, primarily, right? Secondarily, we can find all sorts of different ways that this value manifests. What's the primary way that it manifests? It's that you want to transact in dollars because you can get the US legal system to enforce your rights. Really, to enforce your contract that you're going to make yourself a party of. This other party is going to make themselves a party of this contract, and you are both going to put yourself under the jurisdiction of the United States of America and the US legal system by transacting in dollars. Okay? So what actually, on that level, that's where the value of the dollar is coming from right now. Is that the United States government, if they pay you, they're going to want to pay you in dollars. If they want you to pay them, they're going to want that in dollars. When they say that you need to do XYZ, that's going to be denominated in dollars. When they're saying that you're going to have to pay XYZ if you don't do PDQ, that's going to be in dollars. So all of these things that matter are in dollars. Now, as we've talked about previously, what happened on the international stage? Someone lacked faith in dollars. I wonder, maybe they were doing some things that should make people believe less in dollars. Could be. But someone lacked faith in dollars. And can you guess? Hmm. So, when you lack faith in dollars, what do? Start transacting in other dollars, in other currencies, right? Well, unless you're a corrupt user of the dollar and you lack faith in it, but you want other people to use it. So if you don't believe in the dollar, but you think it's a greater fool situation, well, what are you going to do? You're going to try to trade most of your dollars for something else and then only hold enough dollars to transact in. Well, except you might really need some dollars at some point for, I don't know, what does the US sell? Oh, the US sells all sorts of stuff, all sorts of high tech stuff. So all of the high tech stuff that we actually make in the US and our stuff there, that in some way is lending power, purchasing power to the dollar. Why? Because there's high tech products that can be purchased for dollars. Oh, so the ones that lacked faith, what did they do? Oh yeah, it was that going around demanding that other countries sell oil in prices denominated in dollars, to the point of where our government I do not approve of this. Like, as far as I can tell, Gaddafi was hands down better than the leaders that came before and the leaders that came after. There in Libya. And, Clinton Obama just threw him to the Islamists. It's terrible. There's open slave markets in this country where there was this leader that really, I mean, he's seriously as a leader. He's up there with like Kemal Ataturk, as far as I'm concerned, and that's a big compliment coming from me, Muammar Gaddafi. And what happened? The Clintons happened to him. Obama happened to him. So here's my thing. I don't lack faith in the US dollar. I see every day people behaving in ways that are almost careless because they're so invested in using the US dollar. People are not looking for a reason to stop using the US dollar. And remember also that with all of the talk about using electronic currencies to spy on people and control people and whatnot, um, which again, people should expect that. That's the future. Even if the government doesn't do it, your credit card company's going to do it, and then they're going to sell your info to someone. Your cell phone company is going to get that info. They're going to sell it to someone. And if the government makes it illegal to sell it to someone, they will find a way to make a secondary information product that somehow evades the law that says you can't sell this, and they'll sell like metadata to whoever's trying to buy the metadata, even though you can't get individual user data. Like, they're gonna find a way, right? We should get used to that. But in the meantime, I am not against people using cash. The difficult part to argue on that is that, like in India, uh, Modi did not do a great job at trying to address the cash cleanup situation. And I get it, and I would just say I'm not going to take the time. Anyone who's confused about what a mess it is to mess with cash instead of to make your changes at the other part of the system, like look at India, and it was absolutely, there was economic damage. There were people who are poorer today because of how poorly the rollout went on trying to clean up their money. Um, it is not worth it. It's very likely that a high percentage of dollars really are, and I say a high percentage, but more dollars than you'd think are going to be tied up in the various criminal cartels and gangs that move stuff in and out, and people in and out of the US, and have various operations worldwide, and as well as other governments have to some extent chosen to hold reserves in US dollar. Now, to the extent that those places have chosen to hold reserves in US dollar, they are helping to support the dollar. And when they dump those reserves, that's going to stop supporting the value of the US dollar. So every country that does just decide it doesn't care about holding US dollars as any sort of reserve currency, they could then stop supporting the value in that way. So the big worry has been, well, what if someone that's malicious towards us, like China, what if China dumps all of their dollar holdings? That's going to make a big, 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 big problem. No, no, because I mean, here's the thing: we do absolutely need to limit what any member associated with the CCP can own in the US. But it's their ownership that's the problem. The money is not the problem. And in fact, I mean, if like it would be much more disruptive of China not to buy from us, like, oh no, we're doing business, buy use if they used their entire reserve of US dollars to buy something from the US, like that would probably just stimulate our economy a little, unless they were specifically targeting strategic assets of some sorts, in which case we shouldn't be letting them do it. So it's one of those situations where the people that were fear mongering about, oh, if we don't let the CIA go around and overthrow every country that stops pricing its oil in dollars. No, I'm not convinced. I think that that's actually making more problems for us right now. And I think that it's a terrible look for the country that we have that history that people really did go around and try to bully people into pricing their oil in dollars. So that rolls us back though to what's the meta narrative? The meta narrative is if if we leave rates too low for too long, that will necessitate, that will demand, that will require a rate increase at a later date to avoid hyperinflation. That's the narrative. The narrative is, oh, 2008 was always supposed to be temporary. Yeah. Yeah. So after so for 12 years it was temporary. I mean, I COVID was different. And COVID pricing was always going to be majorly screwed up by the government with all of the lockdowns and all of the regulations and all of the restrictions and all of the everything. And it doesn't make sense to treat those like normal prices. But of course, if we're still going to pay attention to prices and still keep track of prices, we don't need to treat them as normal, but we can keep track of them. And we should say, well, these prices should theoretically be something that come back down. Or, what's the other or? Well, here's the thing, nominal prices can come back down. That's not anything that anyone likes doing. It isn't. If you're running a business, number gotta go up. You can't sell something for fewer dollars than you bought it for. Your business model depends on selling it for more than you bought it for. So if you're trying to keep the economy moving, and your problem is that prices went too high for a lot of people to afford, their theory is that you can drag prices back down by making sure that people don't have the money to buy things. You know, um, they have a target unemployment rate of 5%. So at any given point, they want somewhere around 5% of people to not be able to pay their bills in order to keep the proper balance of wage demand in the economy, right? These people are openly admitting that they are trying that because there's there are people saying that there are businesses that are claiming that they're having trouble hiring the people that they need. Therefore, they want to raise rates to do what? To make it harder for to start a new business or to expand an existing business that would bid up the price of labor by trying to pay people to do something. By offering people jobs, it would be stealing away people from the established players in the economy that are already doing their thing, right? Because the big players already have access to their stuff. They're not going to be very sensitive at all on the borrowing end because they already have their ducks in a row. They already have their big players. And to a very real extent, if they're paying interest to anyone, they're paying interest to themselves. in the scheme of things with the way that they have it stacked up. So, why do they get away with this? Like it's so transparent, right? I mean, they say, "Oh yeah, we have a mandate from the government. It's full employment." And full employment is going to be defined as take all of the people that say that they're looking for work times 95%. That's full employment. 95%. That 5% of people, at any given point, I want to say it's somewhere around 60% workforce participation. So we'll call that six. I mean, it's going to be something on the range. I'm not going to look it up right now. It's going to be something on the range of 100,000 people that are in the workforce, right? And if 5% of them don't have it, that's 5 million people that are out of work. Is when the current bunch at the Fed is saying mission accomplished, that's what we wanted. And if there aren't 5 million unemployed people that want jobs, then they're like, whoa, we need to screw up the economy more. So, where someone like me is like, wow, prices are high, people are struggling, we better make sure that there's enough dollars in the economy to where people can buy the things that they need at those inflated prices. And yeah, I have every bit of faith that the market will balance out because that's what the market does. And I know how much slack is at various points in the market, which needs to be there. I mean, the customer service ethos of corporate America today is essentially that you have to budget for fixing a problem for every customer. And as long as, again, I'm not arguing for or against it, but as long as that's the approach that we're taking, then there will be slack in the economy. There will be money that is look, when someone already has money, they already have a business going, and an opportunity arises, what are they going to do? They're just going to reach into their resources and they're going, however they normally fund their operations, they're going to put out what they need to meet that demand so that they can make their money. That's how it works. And the ones that don't do that aren't going to be in business very long because if you're not meeting the business where it's at and you're not making those basic investments, you're going to lose your market share to someone else. And hey, maybe you run fine at a lower market share, but that's the whole point, is that someone else, if you're not, for instance, if you're in an industry where there's a lot of demand, you never ramp up your capacity to meet that demand. You're asking for a competitor to swoop in, do greater capital investment on you to get the marginal cost per unit to produce it to be at your rate or lower, and then they're going to undercut you and they're going to not just take the rest of the market, they're going to take your share of the market too, all other things being equal, which they never are. But you get the idea here. So you have people that have so little faith in the US dollar that they're they're like, we have to crash the economy and knock over world leaders that stop pricing their oil in dollars, or else we're just going to lose the dollar. It's going to become worthless. And oh, if we and there's a whole list of things that they'll tell you. Oh, the dollar would become worthless if we did. And you start looking at their list of things, and it's like anything that helps actual people. Now, let's tie it back to, I'm sure we've all seen the charts of the beautiful graph, and it's got a bunch of prices, and half of the items are things that the government just pays for through some program or another to make sure that everyone has it. And then the whole rest of the list is stuff that the government just generically has not directly tried to get heavily involved in on the level of buying and selling. Now, there's regulations up the wazoo for a lot of these things, but even with the regulations, and some could argue because of it, I'm neutral to that. You have stuff like, where actual scientific innovation is occurring, and both in new products, but also just in being able to manufacture, like better manufacturing technology. What we've seen is stuff that is not critical, the stuff that people can choose not to buy, the price has gone down. So when people are complaining about inflation, and then you can say, oh, wait a second, though, the price of these things went down, why don't they care? Because those aren't the things that people actually need. Those are essentially um optional. Like, for certain people in their lifestyle choices, they will be still required, but you have a shopping process that's occurring where you have people that are looking into the market, they're seeing what's being offered, they're seeing how much it's going to cost them, and then they're choosing, trading off the balance of their needs and what they're looking for what price they're willing and able to pay. And that process is missing in government purchases to the greatest extent. And I mean, I just watched a great documentary the other day on the gap between how much of this business is specifically by law supposed to go to small businesses, and specifically by law they've just been committing fraud in many cases. And there's a guy who sits around and files FOIA requests all day, and then when they get denied, he sues the government. See what you guys hiding? And his best catch, actually, he spent $1 million in 7 years in court and got a mostly redacted document. Um, but the whole point was that on government contracting, government wasn't following their own rules. And let's start looking at the consequences of that. Um, so, if those dollars were going to big players instead of small businesses, then then again, what that actually meant is that on paper we were addressing a problem. Now, again, whether or not it was a real problem isn't the point. It's that the government said the goal of this program is to make sure that 23% of government contracts are going to small businesses. And again, the government can't even do that. Like, they can't even enforce on themselves for that. They literally spent less than that percentage because they have corrupt and connected people that are making these decisions, and they have lines of communication set up that tell these companies what the contracts are going to be before they go up. That way they're all lined up to take the contracts and whatnot. They do stuff like, they had just companies listed as small businesses that weren't. They have subsidiaries that were look like small businesses until you see who owns them. There is just massive fraud on that level, just like there was massive fraud back in the derivatives market before the 2008 crash, where, just a quick refresher, you had ratings companies who would rate packages of mortgages as being AAA, even though they contained individual packages up to, or mortgages up to 5% or something, that were not AAA. So when you had derivatives that were paying out only if basically all the money came in, and then you had that being derived into a secondary product where only, and theoretically, that was the other thing. It was diversified, right? Because you're diversifying your exposure to these mortgages by making sure that the mortgages are from a variety of markets. Because say you bought into Miami. If you buy property in Miami and then the economy in Miami goes south, well, then that's probably going to drive the value of your home in Miami. And so you'd want to be careful about that, because if you're giving mortgages to someone who's in Miami, then they might just default on it and walk away. And that means that the payments aren't going to come in, and that's going to mess up your derivative that's paying you when people pay their mortgage. So turns out, oh, what do you know? The hot markets had the majority of the housing market activity. So even though you diversified, you still had volatile markets overrepresented. And volatile in this case was referring to the fact that they were going up a lot, which meant that whenever they go down, they were probably going to go down a lot, because that's how volatility tends to work. Unless there's something that changed the fundamentals of the value. Like what? Like what? What would change the fundamentals of the value on a property? Well, that's what's starting to bother me, because right now we really do, on some level or another, actually have some excess housing stock in the US, in the sense that we have houses that people aren't living in, and that we have more houses that people aren't living in than we have homeless people. And that's a good thing. Just to be clear, I like that. I want to keep it that way, right? But here's the thing. Um for all of the people that said, "Oh, wait, can we just put the people that need a house in the houses that exist?" Well, why isn't that happening? Well, for one thing, the houses that exist, um, they have a value that could be disrupted from someone residing there, right? So especially someone that doesn't own the place, there's a very real risk that they're going to do more damage to the residents than whatever they're paying to stay there, unless you do some sort of a background check type thing, right? I mean, you want to make sure that whoever it is that you're renting to is the kind of person who's actually going to like take care of the place. And you can not guarantee that. You can only do your best on that, right? But then, oh wait, there's all these laws that are regarding how you have to conduct yourself when you're renting houses. Oh, well, that's going to drive a bunch of housing off of the market. I mean, sorry, that's how it works. The more risk that you make a landlord take on, then the less likely they are to actually engage in landlording behavior in the first place, to bother trying to rent out a property that they own to someone that needs a place to stay. So what we're doing with regulation, uh, in many cases, and again, it's worst in certain jurisdictions where the housing is most in crisis. And you'd think at some point or another humans would learn that imposing extra costs onto landlords might result in less housing provided. Like, that is economics 101. And yet, places like New York and whatnot seem to think that it'll just work itself out, which, okay, cool, it will. It will. It will work itself out. The natural way for it to work itself out is for them to lose the people who they aren't catering to. That's really normal, right? Someplace like New York, you can expect that since they have a robust welfare system set up, and that they have a robust like corporate district set up, and they have some very nice places to live, and they have some, skyscrapers full of apartments and crap. we should expect that that's what people are looking for, that that people are willing to live that way. And especially, like, dude, uh there's all sorts of cultural things going on there, right? So people are paying a premium to stay in this place, this specific place, because of what's there. And the people who it actually makes sense for them to pay a premium to stay there are the people whose jobs are there, or there's something important culturally to their lives that's there. But anyone else with a brain in their head should be looking at what's a more reasonable place to live. You see, the market's trying to tell people New York isn't a place to live right now unless you fall into a very specific subset. And especially with them dumping all those illegals on to New York, even more so. Because what's that going to do? There's already housing shortage. It's going to drive up the price of housing, and it's going to make it harder to get housing, and those things go together. And so I think that, and where people get confused, and that's, I think that's where I'm going to try to wrap it up here, where people get confused, and the part that just literally makes me go, no, no, you're being stupid, is when they try to make it an issue of, well, uh hard to find and high pricing mean that we should pay the high prices. No, no, that is the opposite of what I'm saying here. Listen, the whole point is that as long as people keep saying yes to prices that go up, the prices can keep going up. The way that the economy actually stops price increases is when people stop buying things. So as long as people keep buying things at the prices that they're available at, we can expect the people that are trying to sell things to be very tempted to raise the price if they think people will pay it. And to the extent that their cost basis is rising, they will want to raise their prices anyways. So here's going to be the part that we have an opportunity that I think is going to get squandered, and that corporate America is just going to fail at this, which is right now would be the perfect time to square up labor costs as a percentage of your revenue, right? Because realistically, if you can set your cost basis for your labor and then make sure that the cost basis on your labor is keeping up with your other cost basis, when you're having to pay more, your workers are probably having to pay more too. And a lot of business owners have a very, very bad instinct that, oh no, times are getting rough. I better draw tight these purse strings. No. When the times are getting rough, that's when you need to invest in keeping your best people that were actually getting things done for you. Because it will cost you more to replace them, and their replacement will be less experienced reliably. I mean, unless you're paying a lot more, in which case you could have already done that, right? You're going to get a worse deal on average. Like if you've got someone who's already in the position, does the job, is productive, like they a lot of, depending on what industry you're in, you're talking about the equivalent of, sometimes in some cases half a year's wages by the time that you finish paying everybody to do paperwork and training a new hire, depending on what your industry is. We're wasting, and here's the thing, that money that I just talked about being wasted, that's people's jobs. There's someone out there whose job is to get paid to push paperwork, and that what someone like me sees as a deadweight cost, someone who's in that job sees it as a job, right? They're like, no, this is my job. I mean, I'm being a productive member of the economy. No. Bullshit jobs, David Graeber, hard recommend. A lot of jobs aren't making the world a better place, so there's that. But no, like I said, I am gonna wrap it up here. But my point to directly, what frustrated me so much when Tony pulled out the establishment narrative there is, again, they're doing the they don't want to talk about the things that matter. They don't want to talk about how much housing costs. They don't want to talk about how much food costs. They don't want to talk about medical. Why not? Those are the main things. Oh, and then even so, they don't want to talk about energy. Why not? Because they say that these things are volatile. Okay, but they're the things we care about. Like, it's not reasonable in an economy where more than half of people really primarily care about the price of the things that they have to have. Okay, so but we already know where the increased pricing is coming for these must-have products, right? It's the government is just going to pay whatever the sticker cost is. And depending, if the government pays, again, price controls suck. If the government doesn't pay enough, you're going to get shortages. If the government pays too much, then of course, you're basically wasting the you are shifting wealth from the average taxpayer slash worker to someone who is, you know, just playing compliant with the system. And that's really what it comes down to, is that as long as we have so many self-licking ice cream cones running around, then there are just so many people with a vested interest in not fixing the system. And I do not see a way out of that without universal basic income as a replacement for these government programs. And universal basic income absolutely would help rebalance our economy. Let's assume for a moment, let's just assume it causes a lot of inflation in housing and food and the other things that people need, right? Let's say for some reason that it is approximately as inflationary as having the government pay for it. I don't believe this. I believe that there's solid evidence that it's less inflationary, but hey, let's just throw a bone to the establishment for a moment, right? What's the consequence? The consequence is that instead of a bunch of people working for the government, people worked for the private sector. And instead of all of the dollars flowing to people that government officials chose, the dollars are flowing to the businesses that consumers decided that they trusted to provide those goods and services. So the only reason within those two choices, which I'm not trying to pull some false dichotomy and saying those are the only two choices, but I'm saying between those two choices, it seems to me like it's more advantageous to, if we're talking about the same amount of money, to have it split up. Now, people are like, oh, it would be more for universal basic income. Okay, let's let's just assume that that's true. Let's assume that the way that the law is passed, because again, the law could be passed in all sorts of different ways, but let's just assume that that's a model that we're going to stick to. Again, then what are we still getting? We are getting an increased allocation of resources towards providing the goods and services that all of us need to provide, which will actually push prices down for the volume, for the actual throughput. So because what happens is you start throwing money at it in a market setting. Because if you just say price, this is the price. We're the government. This is the price. This is what we're paying. Go produce it. Go provide it. Then again, you have those problems. Price is too low, they won't make enough. Price is too high, there's going to be waste. And again, out of the two, price is too high, there's going to be waste, is the less painful on an individual basis. But when everything in the budget, you err on the side of allowing some waste, you get a lot of waste. And when that waste is essentially looking like the federal deficit, then that's when it really matters whether we're going to let the politicians pull a bag over our head and like say, it's like freaking Netflix. You remember how they used to have those commercials where like, if 2 plus 2 equals 4 and, like big cookies are heavier than small cookies, what color shirt should Robin wear to the laundromat? And it's like, well, that's a nonsense question. And then they're like, answer. And they're like, correct. La, 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 la. Right? No, that's the kind of nonsense that's going on right now. We are getting people who are saying, oh yeah, yes, it is very important that we have to watch because we really don't want hyperinflation because it's like Weimar Germany and stuff. Okay, so that's why if everybody has a job and everybody has enough money to pay their bills, that's why it's bad for the economy. Is because we're supposed because it's gonna Weimar. It's gonna Weimar. No, y'all are full of crap and I'm sick of it. And it's lies. And it's obvious lies. Like you don't get a collapse in the value of the dollar unless people stop working for dollars. You do not if the price of hiring someone to work for you goes up, the only reason why that causes in more more upwards price pressure is if the price going up caused the service to never be provided. It was never, the good was never produced, the service was never provided. There's now less value in the market for each dollar to chase. Okay? But if all you did, like if all we did right now was just double all the prices, literally double all the prices, including the value of all the assets, the amount that we're doing per month, or per hour for payments, all of this stuff. And then same thing in the government, we doubled all the tax brackets and all that crap. It shouldn't change anything about the notional system on out of context moving forward basis. But it would actually represent a huge break with the past because the past had all of these smaller numbers and the past has all of these different. I mean, that's the thing. Notice that I didn't say what I didn't say was double all the bank accounts, right? Because still the same number of dollars are in existence. If you double all the prices, we would be moving everything twice as fast, but with the same number of dollars. So, what that should remind everybody is that how much inflationary pressure a dollar puts on the market, it matters what it's buying because dollars that are never going to try to buy food and are only trying to buy gold or Bitcoin are never going to raise the price of food meaningfully. And again, the flip side of that, which is that if we corruptly, you know, if we allow resources to be corruptly shifted away from the production of housing, food, healthcare, and other things that people need, we can expect shortages. We can expect that they're trying to prop up these stupid, I mean, that's the thing. They're like, we need more of this, and people can't afford it. Therefore, we need to pass a law that lowers the price. No, if you need more of it, it needs to cost more. Like, in the long term, you can look for efficiencies and you can invest capital investment in efficiencies. And that's great and positive behavior. But the fact of the matter is, you don't get you don't get more of something provided by keeping the price lower. That is the opposite of how economics works. If you want more of it, you have to pay more. So, what that means is that as long as we allow most of the legal tender units to be held by people who are not in the majority of those trying to purchase the things that they need to get by. We should just expect that at least some of those people, probably the 5% that were purposely keeping unemployed, just a guess, but we can expect that at least some of those people are going to not have what they need available for purchase at a price that they can afford. So that's my point, is that to have a conversation about why we can't fix things is very disingenuous. A more honest conversation would be who doesn't want us to fix things and what costs they are worried that it will impose on them if we fix the system. Anyway, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm going to wrap it up. Um, as always, feel free to hit me up with any sort of follow-ups that you're interested in, either on Facebook or in the YouTube comments. Thanks for staying and playing. Again, thank you, Tony, for for jogging my noggin on that one and just actually riling me up into making a video. So I will catch you guys later. Take care.